Hello, this is Andrea Hendricks, your host of Ignite, a podcast series by Authentico. I am CEO and managing partner of Authentico. Authentico is a full-service multicultural connections, HR, and inclusion agency. Authentico creates meaningful connections to help brands broaden their horizons and reach their business goals. We partner with clients to reach diverse audiences, creating work that resonates and gets results. And we help organizations develop successful multicultural workforce strategies and inclusive learning initiatives. Authentico is connected to our partner organization, Tico Productions, which grew out of the values and goals of founder and CEO CC Rojas. Our goal and our promise is to deliver success to brands by tapping into the vibrancy of diverse markets and to broaden and advance HR and inclusive initiatives. Ignite podcast series is about creating meaningful dialogue to innovate and culturally inspire. If you look up the meaning Ignite, it shares focusing your energy and attention to creatively attract positive outcomes in your life or for your business. This episode will focus on industry perspectives from the top. We have an exciting speaker for us here today. I'm super excited to really look into what can organizations do to enable progressive strategies around inclusivity and belonging. To keep up to date on what's coming up, be sure to follow Authentico on our social media channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So joining me is Mark Hulet, CEO of Greater Kansas City YMCA. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing fabulous. Great to be here.
Before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit about you with our audience, and then I certainly look forward to having a conversation. Mark serves as president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Kansas City. He's held this role since January of 2023. He is a passionate YMCA leader for more than 2 decades, and I can say this, he is leading and carrying forward. He began his Y journey in 2000. Mark has served in nearly every corner of the organization, which I'm excited to learn more about as well. But I don't know if you know this, audience, that under his leadership, the Y has strengthened its footprint across the Greater Kansas City area by bold partnerships, really working on transformative projects, including the development of the Kurt Family YMCA, the revitalization of the Linwood and Atchison YMCA, and groundbreaking collaborations with Platte County, North Kansas City, and University Health. And I could go on and on and on. Currently, Mark serves as chair of the Missouri State Alliance of YMCAs, as a member of the executive committee of the Kansas State Alliance of YMCAs, and on the steering committee of the YMCA North American Network, helping to elevate the voice of the Midwest across the movement. Mark, is there anything else that I'm missing? This is such an impressive bio. Just for the sake of time, what else are you doing in the Y movement? And then we'll get started with our conversation.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for that introduction. It's always humbling to hear that, but I think serving 25 years in this movement, the YMCA, I've just been so blessed to be a part of so many wonderful things, wonderful leaders, wonderful experiences, opportunities to continue to impact that. And that's just my hope that we continue to carry this on.
I know you will. I know you will. I think you continue to model the way and champion what is right for all communities in this region, and certainly the Y movement from a global and national perspective. So thank you for the work that you do, and welcome to the Ignite podcast. Let's get started. So audience, today, when we talk about sharing industry perspectives from the top. And so, Mark, the first, thought that I'd love for you to share on is, what does inclusivity and belonging really mean to you? And why is it so essential now more than ever? And what's missing? Your thoughts.
It's hard for me to separate what it means for me from the community that we serve through the Y. Inclusion and belonging, they're at the heart of who we are as the YMCA, literally meaning for all. And I think that's also the way it shows up in my life. It's not about representation. It's about building relationships. And when people feel seen, valued, connected, that's when communities truly thrive. And I think that members and donors and volunteers in my professional life, I get that same impact with family and friends on the personal side. And I think that now more than ever, people are searching for places to belong, and technology is keeping us connected. I'll just use air quotes around that. But isolation is at an all-time high. And I love that the Y has always been that trusted gathering place where people, regardless of their background, their income, or their belief, can find purpose and connect and support. I truly think what's needed more than ever right now is intentionality. We have to move away from conversation and be consistent with our practice and embed that into our decision making, into our programs, and the partnerships and the relationships that we have. And if we're listening well, we'll be able to pick that up. But the intentionality part of that, Dr. Hendricks, is what I see we need more of.
Yeah, I love how you talk about intentionality. One of the things that I have written a lot about are the 6 I's for success and bold inclusion for greatness. I didn't list intentionality as one of the I's, but I think when we look at the scale and maturity through this work, I think having intentionality as a foundational perspective is really, really key to that. I spent some time not only talking about inclusion, but intersectionality, innovation, intelligence from a cultural intelligence perspective, and having diverse ideas, but ideas in the way that you broaden your scope, similar to what you stated, in order to build partnerships and relationships that matter. So I love the word intentionality in terms of the scope of how to really look at what's missing and what's needed for next steps. There's an article by Deloitte, the 6 signature traits of inclusive leaders, and they talk about capabilities, the capabilities of being a successful inclusive leader. It came out several years ago. So in your space, when you think about your space and then this space from your perspective in your area of expertise, how does that live? Can you give an example of what this space looks like from your perspective in your space?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you the YMCA CEO lens here. I see inclusion and belonging as an organizational strategy, right? Okay. It's not this side initiative. It's embedded in everything we do. And it's in the mission statement. It's in leadership development, how we continue to work through the talent pipeline, recruiting, retention, rewarding, right? I think it's part of our board composition and how we define success. And so when you take belonging and operationalize it, and when it's built into how we recruit, retain, and we partner and we lead, it becomes the culture, not the campaign, right? The goal of the YMCA of Greater Kansas City is to make belonging measurable, not just meaningful. That's part of what's happening right now as we finish up our strategic direction, our strategic planning. How do we measure belonging and not just talk about it, but show it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you for that. Well, I think when we think about organizations of your size and scope, which touches on a very Madrid or diverse outreach, internal, external, you have to have a mission and vision that reflects the communities you serve, the clients you serve, the customers, whatever terms you use internally. It has to be reflective of that, and it has to evolve and advance and be progressive in its order, if you will. And what was appropriate 165 years ago may or may not be appropriate on progressive strategies for now. And so let's talk a little bit about that in terms of your space on progressive strategies. In your thoughts as a CEO leading this, what should those progressive strategies focus on now to continue the journey towards inclusive practices? And you can pick any lane you want to really share that. And then if you'd like to share a project that is underway or potentially near launch that will advance that, because we're in particular unique times now. Any thoughts on progressive strategies?
Absolutely. I'm going to jump into community because I think that continues to evolve around, again, our strategic direction and the vision that we see, the why, as the center of community. And the vision is built around how do we continue to convene connections and bringing people together and partners together to work on the multitude of things that we do, right? We are trying to tackle health, inequities, social challenges collectively, and inclusion becomes very visible, I believe, as you step into our programs, into our centers, as you get to meet our boards, as you see the work that we're doing. And I've got 2 examples for you how the center community and these progressive strategies that are happening, and some of them have transitioned over time. While, 75 to 100 years ago, we began safety of raw water and swim lessons. And that initiative was truly just teaching kids how to swim, right? Mm-hmm. But suddenly it's become this statement about equity. And over the last 10 to 12 years, we are literally breaking down barriers that have existed for generations and making sure that every child, regardless of the zip code they live in, the color of their skin, their access, we're providing them life-saving skills around water. That's inclusion in action. Then you take another look at one of our programs, our Challenger Adaptive Sports Program, which creates these adaptive leagues for kids and adults, not just kids, but adults as well with disabilities. And it's just not about the competition. It's about connecting them, and it's about giving everyone a chance, because everyone deserves a chance to experience teamwork and joy and fun and belonging. And these programs, they continue to remind us that inclusion happens when we, again, I'll go back to the word we used before, intentionally design places and spaces and programs where people truly feel like they matter.
I love that. And I think when I think about the descriptor, the words that you're using, the phrases and the actions to get to the outcome of belonging, those are actionable, those are doable, and those make sense. Like you said, no matter what communities of color or gender or generation that they come from, they're scalable in reach and opportunity. And so let's stay with progressive strategies a little bit more. And as you think about the listeners here to measure success on your progressive strategies, because we could have programmatic elements that are available that are out there. How do you measure your success? How do you know when you get to belonging with your progressive strategies? What's one thing that you look at?
So I'll take the safety around water example that we used. And what I see as the difference is, and when we truly see the impact, is that you've got this movement of people that are clamoring for more. And we're continuing to find those that want to invest more into keeping kids safe around water. Initially, this whole swim lesson thing, you paid for swim lessons, you took them. And now it has flipped to be able to be an inclusive program where we provide these programs for free because we're out in the community raising funds. And when the community is responding like the way they are, and we're teaching, over 1,500 kids a year in Black and brown communities that didn't have access, it's working because people are investing to give kids an opportunity, regardless of where they live, regardless of what their background is, and giving them an opportunity to be safe around the water. And it's more than just not drowning. It's creating confidence when you've been able to be around the water and can get in and get out without having, a life issue. It's creating opportunities that connect you to other people who are going through the same struggles you are, even at the age of 5 or 7. Those relationships matter, and you feel this movement of response from the community. That's when I know it's happening, and the community continues to invest in that. Challenger is another one. It began as a little program for kids who couldn't, because of their disabilities, their walkers and their wheelchairs, couldn't get through the grass at a baseball field. But the community responds when you develop the program and show if we can find a place in a space, if we can create a venue for kids to be able to get on a surface that can move with them and not against them. It's kind of a metaphor for how life works, period. And so just a response of the community is when I see it happening. It's not the dollars. You can count people, but what you count are the smiles on the kids' faces, the hugs from the parents, the response and the emotional connection that really happens when you create community and create connections. That's where I see the energy become what it is and what we're talking about.
Wow, powerful. Oftentimes leaders such as yourself, your peers talk about business value and social value. You can have both, but organizations that pioneer, progress, and that are transformational, in my perspective, have the SV, the social value as a part of that. And it's really the things that you're talking about are interrelated. They're interrelated shifts by influencing your business priorities, reshaping your capabilities of the past, the present, to get to the future outcomes and strategies for success, and will really allow you to have another 165 years of future of success. And so I'm glad to hear that. I think one of the things I think about when you talked about those two programs, swimming, the swim component and the Challenger component, is the commitment that you're seeing from the community. They're staying the course. It's hard, but it's staying the course to invest in something because it has demonstrated value and demonstrated success. And that is strategies for success or initiatives that are underway. Anything else you want to share of another impactful initiative that's underway?
I think it's not necessarily what we call a program, but the YMCA was founded, and we'll go back 165 years ago, especially here in Kansas City. It was founded with volunteers, right? And I think volunteerism is a program, and it is something that we have lived on. And in fact, the YMCA of Greater Kansas City didn't have its first paid employee until 32 years into the organization. And so until 1892, the first paid employee. So it's built on volunteers, the volunteer programs, and both of these programs that we just talked about, we can't do it without the volunteers because you can't staff it to the level of impact. And when you see the volunteer turnout and the investment for people that want to give their time and their space to make a difference, that's what we live and breathe on at the Y. In all of our programs, there's opportunities for that volunteerism to take hold and help elevate the program to that next level.
Well, I think it invites curiosity. I think one of the signature traits of an inclusive leader is someone who is curious about what's going on in their community and then offering different ideas or leveraging their time, talent, and resources to enable growth. That is an inclusive mindset. That's an inclusive leader, and that's an inclusive community. When you see something that you want to make better, you do something so that you can get different results. That is curiosity. That's enabling, and that is using multiple levers. So how do you advocate as a CEO or just in general for inclusivity in the workplace?
Well, you mentioned it at the outset, you've got to be able to model the leadership behavior that we want to see. Creating this culture where people will feel safe to speak up, challenge respectfully, I'll say, and bring their full selves to work, right? I think advocacy and how we advocate and try to drive inclusivity in the workplace, it has to be modeled, and it has to start at the top, and it has to be, something that I feel good about. And it begins with being open and transparent at every level from that point, from my door to the lifeguard, from the welcome center representative at the Kirk Y to the youth development leader out in the Shawnee Mission School District. When people see that their voices matter, they're likely to be more engaged, contribute, and lead from where they are, right? Yeah. And I would continue to say that for us, how we continue to drive that is we use storytelling, and we love to share the stories of success that we have across this greater Kansas City metro and use those staff dialogues to keep this alive. We remind our teams daily that advocacy just isn't a statement. Driving inclusivity is how we show up for each other and how we show up daily. I just think it's something that's innate about the why we love. And there's so many ways these days to share stories and keep that alive with your staff. So I feel like that is something that happens for us. But again, it goes back to how everybody models it. Everybody's a leader. I try to be as flat as an organization we can be and just be transparent.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think the listeners will glean some best practices from that and be able to enable their own next steps or adjust however they see fit. I hate when we get to this part of the program, but today we offered some nuggets, some wisdom, if you will. But before we close, share with the audience your favorite best practice article, book, or tip as a great takeaway to allow them to build capacity in this space. What do you have for us?
Okay, I'll share this resource, and it's really shaped a little bit how I think about the why. And again, thinking at the why is 165 years old. We don't plan on stopping anytime soon. We're an international movement. We're a national movement. We're a local movement. But I always think about the book by Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game. And, it's not a traditional DE&I book by any means, but what it talks about is just how it connects in powerful ways. Sinek talks about leadership and leading with a just cause and building trusting teams and playing for the long game and not just these short-term wins. We are truly in a world of you can continue to talk about how do we win in the short term, but we obviously have been playing this game, if you want to look at it that way, at the why, for a long time, for 165 years. And I think you can tie inclusion to that because it's truly creating these spaces where everyone feels safe and use the word value. I'm going to continue to use the why. What's the value proposition that continue to come and be part of something bigger at the why. And we can call that us feeling like we're the center of community, a place where belonging, it's not a destination. It's actually an ongoing, continuous journey that we're on. And I tie into that. And sometimes I think people just try to play the game 1 year to year. And it's really how do we play the long game on this and keep ourselves on the field and in shape and not just shoot for the short-term wins, but how do we play the long game and keep inclusion a part of that? And I think when you have it as a baseline, when you have it as a foundational component, you've got a chance to do that and continue to be a center of community like the Y wants to be.
Perfect. I want to thank you for your insightful perspective. I know everyone listening gleaned industry best practice approaches to this very topic. I want to take a moment to thank you for listening and encourage you to continue to climb in this space. It matters and it makes a difference. We look forward to having you engaged in future programs. See you next time. Go out and ignite your strategies.